Hello. Let's do chapter 2 of Stnr. Yeah, this is in a busy backyard, so we'll see how this goes. Well, busy neighborhood. So yes, chapter 2. I guess Stnr's actually semi-okay with his parents, though he's definitely rapidly become, I think as he recognizes, he's become strangers to them. He does take up teaching, and indeed, like his, I guess, mentor, Archer Sloan, he finds that his teaching, he can't really particularly, he's cut off from his passion. It's like he's standing back from himself, and it's sort of like he's doing his rote, and it's only as like a student that kind of the spark, the passion comes. And here is this little quote here, which is like a kind of a, it feeds into an observation his fellow PhD student makes of him later. But the thing is, as his mind engaged itself with its subject, as it grappled with the power of the literature he studied and tried to understand its nature, he was aware of a constant change within himself. And as he was aware of that, he moved outwards from himself into the world which contained him, so that he knew that the poem of Milton's that he'd read, or the essay of Bacon's, or the drama of Ben Jonson's, changed the world which was its subject, and changed it because of its dependence upon it. It seems to kind of get into, you know, how when you engage with literature, it changes you. And it's like he's aware of how it's like he's moving outward of himself into the world which contained him. And that he knew, like, you know, the poem, like this poem or essay or drama changed the world which was its subject, and changed it because of its dependence on it, because it's so connected to it. So I think that really gets to kind of like that vital interaction in literature, which is, I think, quite beautifully put. And it's interesting because he does actually make friends. He actually has human contact, and it's these two PhD students. One who is kind of a bluff, incompetent, but he's popular with the freshmen because that's who they get to teach. They get to teach freshmen in the kind of their stuff, and he can chum up with the professors. So, you know, this is a guy who's probably going to do well in the institution of the university. And the other guy, David Masters, is sharp-tongued, insolent. I think is how he's put, slight, dark youth with a sharp tongue and gentle eyes. Among the faculty and the graduate students, he had a reputation for arrogance and impertinence, which was generally conceded that he would have some difficulty in finally obtaining his degree. It's like, yeah, it's the bluff incompetent who's good at chumming around is the one who will do well, while somebody who is kind of, you know, has got that intelligence, and as he says later, can't shut up about himself. But Masters, he looks at his three fellows. Oh, here, Theo's harassing Jackie at the moment. He you know, he's like, you know, he kind of gets their number. It's like he looks at Stnr and it says, Stnr here, I imagine, sees it as a great repository. He's talking about the university, like a library or a whorehouse where men come of their free will and select that which will complete them, where all work together like little bees in a common hive. The true, the good, the beautiful, they're just around the corner in the next corridor. In the next corridor. They're in the next book, the one you haven't read, or in the next stack, the one you haven't got to. But you'll get to it someday. And when you do, he looked at the egg for a moment, then took a large bite of it and turned to Stnr, his jaws working and his dark eyes bright. It's like, yes, that constant thing. And, you know, will you ever actually get it? And then, you know, he says, like, you know, Finch is like, basically you see the university as a kind of spiritual sulfur and molasses that you administer every fall to get the little bastards through another winter, and you're the kindly old doctor who benignly pats their heads and pockets their fees. It's like, that's probably a fairly successful university professor. And then, you know, and then for me, this is an asylum, or what do they call them now? A rest home for the infirm, the aged, the discontent, and the otherwise incompetent. Look at the three of us. We are the university. Basically saying that, you know, Finch being the incompetent, Stoner being a dreamer. Oh, actually, this is a tie-in with my last read. Oh, you too are among the infirm. You are a dreamer, the madman in a madder world, our own Midwestern Don Quixote without his Sancho, gambling under a blue sky. Yes, that is definitely. And then, what about you? Master's like, oh, I'm one of you. Worse, in fact, I'm too bright for the world. I won't keep my mouth shut about it. It's a disease for which there's no cure, so I must be locked up, where I can be safely irresponsible, where I can do no harm. And then he leaned forward again and smiled at them. We're all poor Toms. We're all a cold, which, you know, Stoner immediately goes King Lear, which, you know, we've gotten the sonnet in the first chapter, and we get King Lear in this chapter. We're not going for the comedies of Shakespeare here. And indeed, you know, we're not, because if you're going into university in 1910, what's coming along but the First World War, where of course Finch, everybody, there's basically the fever for when the Americans go in. There's the fever, everyone's gonna go in because we got to teach them a lesson. And Finch starts talking about the Huns and his face twisting with hate, and says like, well, of course you're going to sign up. Masters is going to sign up, and Masters is like, yeah, of course I'm going to sign up. You know, it's like, what else? I might as well kind of get to see a bit of the world. But he's like, he has no passion. It's like, God, whatever you do, don't do this for God or country or for the good old university. You know, do this for yourself if you're going to do it. And you know, Stoner is just like, well, I hadn't really even considered doing it. And he goes to Finch, to Sloane, and he says like, you know, well, should I or what? And he says like, look, you can decide to do it or not. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I was born just before, the American Civil War. My father died in it. These things, they end up just sort of killing. They take away from our society so many things and just sort of leaving the brute left. You know, people who have been brutalized by the war, and you know, kind of inkling of like, you know, this is not going to be a glorious adventure of knights, chivalric knights. Just to slip in one of my own other obsessions at the moment, and so he actually decides not to. He decides he's not going to do it because he's not really interested in. He doesn't want to go away from you know, the thing of if I can see it. You know, you must remember what you are and what you have chosen to become, and the significance of what you are doing. There are wars and defeats and victories of the human race that are not military and that are not recorded in the annals of history. Remember that while you're trying to decide what to do. You know, I think that might be a kind of significant thing going along, because this is definitely, Stoner's life is not one of these lives that's going to be recorded in the annals of history, but maybe captured in the annals of literature. Yeah. And you know, Finch is like, oh, you're letting us down, Bill. You're letting us all down. And there's a disdain and a kind of turning to anger. But Masters is like, no, you know, this is like, you know, you know, you gotta, you know, you've always had that lean, dedicated look about you. It doesn't matter, of course, but what made you finally decide? And he you know, Stoner did not think for a moment. He thought at last of the last 2 days of silent struggle that seemed towards no end and no meaning. He thought of his life at the university for the past 7 years. He thought of the years before, the distant years with his parents on the farm, and of the deadness from which he had been miraculously revived. Because that's the thing about this university. It's like he was sort of going to be his parents' kind of deadness of grinding, death of the soul stuff, but he's been rescued. He's found refuge in what Masters very much kind of talks about as kind of like a monastery, them being monks, where, you know, like the medieval church, they didn't give a shit about the laity. It's about saving and finding refuge for themselves, and he's found his refuge, and he does not want to give that up. And, you know, Finch is like, "You're going to live to regret this, Bill," he said hoarsely, and his voice hesitated between threat and pity. And he felt no guilt for his decision when conscription became general, and he applied for his deferment. But, you know, he definitely saw that the older colleagues and the contempt and disrespect shown through his students' conventional behavior towards him. He even suspected that Archer Sloane, who had one time expressed a warm approval of his decision to continue at the university, grew colder and more distant as the months of the war wore on. And indeed, at the end, it's like, yeah, good old Finch. He slips through. He actually manages to get his PhD while in service, and, you know, he would fulfill the requirements necessary for doctorate, and he would take in the summer from teachers college there. And it also told him, this letter from Finch, that Dave Masters, almost exactly a year after his enlistment, with the first American troops to see action, had been killed at Chateau Thierry. So that kind of the grind of war that he has abstained from. He has chosen a different path, which maybe he'll come to regret. Maybe he won't. Probably a mixture of both. All right, I will leave it there. Chapter 2 of Stnr. Even better, Chapter 1.